A Sydney court has heard a former person of interest in the investigation into the disappearance of William Tyrrell had no idea police were recording his every move. Paul Savage has been giving evidence at the trial of former lead detective Gary Jubelin, who's accused of illegally recording 4 conversations with him. Crime reporter Mark Reddie joins us now with more. So, Mark, what did Paul Savage have to say?
Well, Ros, Paul Savage lived across the road from where William Tyrrell disappeared from his foster grandmother's home at Kendall on the New South Wales mid-north coast in September 2014. And over the years, the 75-year-old has been subject to intense police scrutiny, particularly by former lead detective Gary Jubelin. Now, on 4 occasions, Gary Jubelin is accused of illegally recording conversations with Paul Savage on his mobile phone. And today, while appearing by video link in Port Macquarie Court, Paul Savage said he had no idea he was being recorded. He said, "I didn't think people could be stripped of their privacy." He also said he had no idea about the massive surveillance operation that took place around his home in the bush track, where there were a number of surveillance operatives and cameras recording his every move. He also spoke about the persistence of Gary Jubelin turning up on his doorstep and saying, well, he was giving me a pretty hard time that I'd done it and all the rubbish, and he would be back tomorrow to pick me up. Now, when he referred to that, the defence barrister, Margaret Caneen, said, well, what did he mean by that? And he said, well, he was going to come back to arrest me. But the conversations that were played to the court, there was no mention of that. But Paul Savage was adamant that Gary Jubelin had threatened him with an arrest. Now, we're yet to hear from Gary Jubelin himself, so this is all the words of what Paul Savage has to say. But, of course, this has shed more light on just the impact this police operation has had on Paul Savage, who is no longer a person of interest in the William Tyrrell investigation.
The junior detective has also given evidence. Mark, what did he say?
Yeah, so Detective Greg Gallio was one of the most junior officers involved in this investigation, and he claims he was told by Gary Jubelin to use his phone to record a conversation on Gary Jubelin's phone that he was having on loudspeaker with Paul Savage. And he said that Gary Jubelin said, "Just do it," and that he was in shock when that happened. And then he was asked why he never reported that to the Professional Standards Command or anyone more senior, given this is illegal, and he said he knew it was illegal. And he said because he was in fear, and then was asked why by the prosecution he was in fear. He said, well, he was worried about being belittled by other team members. He said career jeopardy was also a reason. But interestingly, he said that he was worried about being bullied and intimidated by Gary Jubelin himself, saying that Gary Jubelin had done that to other members on the homicide team. Now, he was also told, the court heard, to create a synopsis of this conversation, and he said that Gary Jubelin told him, "Don't do it word for word." Now, that conversation is part of the brief of evidence that was handed to the coroner, and of course this coronial inquest has been ongoing and will resume later next month. The court also heard that those surveillance devices placed around Paul Savage's home were inaudible, and it was really hard to listen to them, that sometimes everything that Paul Savage did wasn't recorded. So you can also draw an inference here as to maybe why Gary Jubelin decided to use his mobile phone. Now, that, of course, was the evidence given by that detective. We're also right now hearing evidence from another senior detective. And
at one stage, a witness was asked to leave the courtroom. Mark, what happened?
Yeah, this was quite extraordinary. Detective Greg Gallio was asked to leave the courtroom by Magistrate Ross Hudson, and this was after he said he gave the statement about what had happened with Mr. Jubelin at the the beginning of 2019, and he'd also spoken of his ambitions to be part of the unsolved homicide squad, that he'd always wanted to do that. And then, of course, after these alleged illegal recordings took place, he gave the statement against Mr. Jubelin. Now, the magistrate, Ross Hudson, said, and I quote, "He makes a statement and gets his dream job. I think it is a credit issue." So, of course, that drew a bit of shock from the court. Then Detective Greg Gallio was asked to come back in and give more evidence. But certainly the magistrate has expressed some concerns about the credibility and also the motivation behind why one of Gary Jubelin's junior officers gave that evidence against him.
Thanks, Mark.